There someone whose work I came across really, um, I think now at a very providential time during my first experiences in the wilderness was Phyllis Tickle's work.
Mhm. Mm.
And just an incredible theologian and historian for the church. Sometimes when I would read her books, and I came into it from like that side door of the emerging church conversations in the early aughts. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah.
But there was this teaching that I heard her give one time that where she talked, I think it was in her book, The Great Emergence, and then I heard her speak on it one time at a conference. And she talked about how almost every 500 years the church kind of undergoes this thing she called like a rummage sale. And I think I talked about it a wee bit in my an earlier book that I wrote called Out of Sorts, where she talked about how almost every 500 years or so the church universal goes through this experience of saying, "Well, we're going to get rid of some things. And then there's some new things we're gonna add in, and then there's gonna be some things that we hang on to.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will take us 100 years, if not longer, to figure out what those things are." And that metaphor of like keep, toss, repurpose, or hold on to kind of became this thing that I could kind of hold on to where it gave me room for holding on to some things as opposed to just doing the full burn it down that
Right.
I was in at the time.
Right.
Because at the time I was very deeply in there is nothing redeemable about Christianity. Organized religion, responsible for everything that's terrible in the world.
Yep.
There's no path here. I suspect everything I've ever been taught about scripture. I have no idea what this means for moving through the world. It turns out a lot of things I was taught are not true. And and so I mean there was all these moments where I was like, I got a long list of all the things I can toss,
Mm.
all the things I can get rid of, all the things I want to toss on that fire. The harder work for me was holding some room for what I wanted to hold on to, but also holding room for what I wanted to reimagine,
Mm. Yeah.
to find the thing that was at the core of that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that was hardest for me in that season and in that work was realizing how bad I had gotten at discernment because I had outsourced that to the quote unquote man of God or spiritual leaders
To the
around me.
authorities. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They'll tell me what's right and what's wrong. They'll tell me what's good and what's evil. They'll tell me who the enemy is
Mm.
and who I should be against. They'll tell me who to be afraid of.
Mm.
And so to all of a sudden realize, like, oh no, I think the invitation here is to grow up. I think the invitation is to learn how to discern good fruit, right? And there's this teaching of one of the things that really drew me back was the person of Jesus, for sure. Um, I think because when I very first began that process, I had this moment where I was like, well, before I reject this, I should figure out who Jesus is. Like, I know a lot about church,
Mm.
but I'm I don't know if you remember Michael Spencer. He was the internet monk back in the early aughts for a lot of us, and he used to call it churchianity.
Mm.
Like, I was really good at churchianity, but I was like, I don't know about so much about knowing Jesus. And so, spending a lot of time in the Gospels, getting to know more about Jesus, there was this passage where he talks about good fruit versus bad fruit. And it was remarkable to me how I felt like at that stage of my life, I looked around at rotting fruit and a swath of spiritual leaders in my life who were pointing at rotting fruit and saying, "No, that's good. That's the good stuff right there." And me being like, "You know what it's doing? Making me sick. And it's making whole groups of people sick. It is causing destruction and damage and trauma and this is not good fruit."
Yeah.
But even being able to name that felt incredibly difficult. And so learning how to discern good fruit was a thing that you almost have to learn, right? If you spend a lifetime denying your own intuition and denying what you actually know, or being told and gaslit almost on what
Mm.
good fruit is in the service of someone else's idea of what the greater good is,
Yeah.
usually,
Yeah.
right? It can have a huge impact, on our lives. And so I think for me, the very first question or invitation I had on being able to start to discern what is worth keeping here and what are some things I need to let go of began really with that sort of simplicity. What is bringing life? What is bringing flourishing? What is actually good fruit here?
Yeah.
And where can I actually see and experience that? Let's just start there, right? And so I think that that's where those elements around prayer for me. I mean, I've always been someone who loved to pray. And when I lost those old pathways of prayer, it was scary and disorienting and awful, but also freeing. And there was a lot of relief to it as well. But then being able to say, okay, I think there is still something here worth contending for.
Mhm.
I think there's something here worth holding on to. And so, where can I find good fruit in prayer? Where can I find flourishing in life that doesn't feel like controlling outcomes and doesn't feel like barking orders at God and doesn't feel like convincing myself of something I should be believing,
Mhm.
or whatever else, right? And
Mhm.
even if we need to rest in other people for a little while we figure out how to fix our little discerners, learn
Mhm.
how to, honor our intuition,
Yeah.
learn how to love our bodies,
Mhm.
learn how to love each other well, like it, I don't know. I think that for me, that keep, toss, repurpose cycle has continued.
Yeah.
And I've often been surprised by what I held on to. And I think prayer was one of those. Like, I genuinely, there's a ton of them where I was like, I'm 100% convinced that I will never pick this up again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is long gone.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, here you find yourself being like, you know what? There's something here I find precious. There's something here I want to keep playing with. There's something here I want to keep exploring. Might look completely different than it did, but there's a glimmer of something here that I want to hold on to, and I want to honor that too.